All right, welcome to another episode of Safer Communities Canada. We're very, very honored to have a youth representative advocating for youth issues in the city, Mr. Stephen Mensah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start out by reading a short version of his bio, which doesn't do him justice. He's always, I see him at all the events. I see him on CP24, always advocating, and we really appreciate what you do for youth and with youth. So, really quick bio. Stephen Mensah is the Executive Director of the Toronto Youth Cabinet. Never heard of them. Highly recommend you check out their website where you can learn more. Through the organization and his advocacy, Stephen brings a rich and diverse background, shaped in part by his formative years spent in Ghana. We got quite a few Ghanaian staff here at YAAACE as well.
We're the best.
As the voice of over 623,000 young Torontonians, Stephen tirelessly advocates for a more equitable and youth-friendly city. Under his leadership, the Toronto Youth Cabinet has emerged as a powerful catalyst for change, spearheading initiatives to address pressing issues such as community safety and youth unemployment. Notable accomplishments during his tenure include securing an additional $15 million in investments for youth programs and establishing 5 new youth hubs in Toronto. He's been instrumental in addressing systemic racism in education, advocating for measures to combat anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism in the school system, and champion measures to deal with the rising youth mental health crisis, such as mental health literacy and training for school and staff, and secured millions of additional investments to support youth mental well-being. His dedication has earned him recognition as one of Toronto's rising stars by the Toronto Life magazine, and he's currently completing a Bachelor of Arts with honors in politics and governance and criminology from a Toronto Metropolitan University. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we always start off by trying to get to know our guest stories because it's very interesting how folks from different walks of life end up doing advocacy and activism work. And I think the story is just as important as the impact.
Yeah.
So for you, give us a little bit about your upbringing and, your time spent in Ghana and then coming to Toronto and trying to figure out your identity. And how did then all of those lead to where you're at now at the Toronto Youth Cabinet?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. So thankfully, my time spent in Ghana was one that really shaped my life. And I wasn't sure what I was going to make of it when going to Ghana. So basically, I was born here, left in grade 8 to go to Ghana for 3 years. So came back in roughly grade 11. And so those 3 years were really formative. It really helped me to get back in tune with my culture and my identity and just reconnect with my familial roots, but also it really broadened my sense of social justice, and I really believe it helped grow my empathy and understanding of some of the global challenges that we see around the world. And obviously coming back to Toronto, which we know most diverse city in the world and whatnot, Definitely. I think that experience from Ghana to Toronto, it really helped me be even more of an effective advocate to the diverse young people we have in this city, because I already had that global perspective and global point of view. And I think that duality of perspective from my Ghanaian roots as well as my Toronto upbringing together has helped me be a more effective advocate and who I am today.
Yeah, so as a follow-up, thanks for sharing that. Like for me, I was born in Iran, right? So now if I go back home, I'm not like Iranian enough. And here I'm not Canadian enough. So you're like negotiating your identities across these core cultures that have influenced your values and upbringing. How do you navigate that? Like, the different culture, the intercultural aspect of who you have become and how you operate.
I think what was helpful was the biggest challenge was my accent, and so that was the biggest giveaway, is like, oh, he's not from Ghana. But I think ultimately and what helped was I went to a private school in Ghana, and so it was a good number of international students there as well, so it wasn't as potent when it came to he's not Ghanaian enough, so on and so forth, because everyone recognized, thankfully, that hey, we're part of the diaspora and we're Ghanaian by blood and at the heart of it. And I think it also goes back to the actions and some of the things I've been able to do while in Ghana, and the things I've been able to do for Ghana while here in Canada, which has helped me remain even more connected with my roots. Because obviously, just because I'm Ghanaian by blood and due to my parents, it does not necessarily mean I'm for the Ghanaian community. But thankfully, I've been able to, I guess, back that up and show that through some of the work I've been able to do to support Ghanaian youth here in Toronto, as well as back home in Ghana.
That's beautiful. And I think the confidence piece is so important, because when you learn about your culture in a way that is empowering, it makes knowing your values easier, and you're able to navigate some of those tough situations where it's all about negotiating who you are.
Absolutely.
So the Toronto Youth Cabinet, I think not enough people have heard about it. I am grateful to have learned about it and see the amazing work you've done, and it has led to some great outcomes for youth. Just break it down for our listeners in the audience. What is the Toronto Youth Cabinet, and how do you work with the city and the politicians to really center youth issues?
Yeah. So in the simplest words, the Toronto Youth Cabinet is the voice of Toronto's youth at City Hall. And so we were created in 1998 by City Council with the mandate of advocating on behalf of Toronto's over 623,000 youth who live in the city. And so our mandate is to do just that, as well as to encourage young people to become more civically engaged and engaged in policy development, civic engagement, and just politics at all levels of government. So not just municipal, but federal and provincial as well. And so in respect to our relationship with councillors, I mean, ultimately how we get stuff done is working with the mayor, councillors, city staff, and young people. Obviously, young people are at the core of what we do, and youth serving organizations to help amplify the message of young people. And I think another point is our membership is comprised of youth who live, work, or go to school in the city of Toronto and who are between the ages of 13 to 24. So we have folks who live in Barrie, but because they go to York University, they're able to, tap into the Toronto Youth Cabinet and be a part of our group.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I didn't even know that it existed since 1998. So that's a rich history right there.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved? Like, who came along and say, hey, you should get involved with, and how did you start? Like at the bottom and you work your way up, because now you're currently the executive director. So how was your journey?
So first, it was a friend, Rania, who when she came to my local civic center. There was an event there, and she's like, "Hey, it's on your cabinet with 7 applications. Stephen, you should apply." And I was unsure at first, because although I was doing work in my community, when I heard about the Toronto Youth Cabinet and saw the work they did, I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. It was a bit intimidating at first. However, due to her encouragement and that of other people, I shot my shot and I applied for the role of education lead. Well, actually, first I applied for 2 roles. First, community safety lead, and my number 2 choice was education lead. And at the end, I ended up getting education. And I'll go back as we're in this conversation how it was a full circle moment to still help me address community safety issues. We'll discuss that afterwards. I was education lead for 2 years, and then now I've been an ED for around 3 years. So overall, I've been a part of the TYC for 5 years, and I'm grateful for the encouragement of Rania, and my other peers at that time and mentors who thought I was worthy enough and capable enough to be in such a role.
I mean, that's great to know. And, I know you're doing some amazing work through your team now. We were honored to host a focus group with some of our YAAACE youth participants to learn about their experiences and the issues impacting them, facilitated by your staff. So it was really great to see how they're always trying to center the lived experiences of youth and how you take that and channel that to the politicians and city council. So got one more curveball here before I ask you the next question. Walk me through the first time you experienced City Hall and try to understand how it all works. Like, what was going through your mind from an embodied lens when you went through that?
I think the first thing was, okay, maybe make sure I'm dressed right. I think that was the first thing, is not coming in with a hoodie and just whatever. It's like, okay, let me come in with my suit and tie straight, everything good, and just really even trying to figure out how to navigate. Because at first I didn't have an access card to get in, so I was just getting in, but without an access card. And even when I got an access card, I was still threatened and intimidated, because it's a big building, but beyond that, you never know who you're interacting with. Obviously now I know the faces, but an average person, I guess, walking in won't know you're passing by the city manager, or you're passing by the CFO or a counselor, and so on and so forth. And so I think just that mindset going into it, really had me on my toes, because don't get me wrong, I'm not one who behaves bad. I behave good, but still I was extra on my toes and really being careful to make sure that I wouldn't say the wrong thing, I wouldn't move the wrong way, and just overall I wouldn't make a mistake, because I know there's not a lot of people who look like me in those spaces back then and today.
Definitely.
There's still not a lot. So really just trying to make sure I'm still confident but still careful. But 5 years later, I mean, thankfully I'm able to walk in there with a hoodie and tracksuit or whatever, and still be my professional self, but more so still be my authentic self. And I think that's attributed to just the comfortability and so many people and my friends and peers I've been in relationships I've been able to build of other Black individuals who are in bigger roles and in roles who are just, once again, their authentic self, and despite whatever the institution might put on you.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, as a Black leader, you're always under the microscope, right? And so I think part of what you do is system navigation.
Yeah.
And I think anyone with more experience becomes better at that. And then it gets supplemented by all the relationships you build, and people respect you for the work you do, not just talking about it, but leading it.
Absolutely.
Which is a great segue to my next question. You know, in your role, whether as leads of different portfolios in the Toronto Youth Cabinet and, you know, in the recent years as the executive director, can you give us some of the specific campaigns or initiative that you spearheaded to address community safety concerns among young Torontonians?
Yeah. So the key piece has been the pushing for more youth hubs and youth spaces, enhanced youth spaces across Toronto. And so this was something that has been a key advocacy of the Toronto Youth Cabinet historically. And when I came in, really trying to redouble our efforts to ensure that at the very minimum, every neighborhood improvement area every young person in a neighborhood improvement area has access to a youth space and a youth hub where they're able to get access to recreational programming, employment supports, and other types of support services, which are so critical to their development as a young person. So youth hubs have been key. The second piece has been employment. I always say the best antidote to crime is a good job and a good education. And so ensuring that young people have access to not just any job, but a meaningful and gainful job that's going to really help them towards a future of career.
Not just minimum wage, because that's not going to help you get out of poverty, right?
It's really not. And I think when you talk to young people, the whole retail jobs of Foot Locker and whatnot, McDonald's, like that's not cutting it. And when you go on the street, someone will tell you, oh, there's jobs everywhere. There's always these hiring signs. But like, how many of those jobs are really going to help you level up towards a future of career success? And so I think employment, youth hubs, as well as this overall pushing for more funding towards violence prevention grants to support grassroots youth-led organizations have been key advocacy pillars of TYC when it comes to the umbrella of community safety and improving that.
No, that's great. A follow-up question, how do you mobilize the youth to then translate their message and concerns to City Hall? So I know, as I said, I saw you do the focus groups, you've done surveys, you're doing outreach, but is there some specific strategies that are like the formula for your success?
Meeting young people where they're at and centering their voices. I'm always saying, the mandate of TYC is to amplify young people's voices, but what better way to do that by creating that safe space for young people themselves to come and lend their own voice in their own words, in their own perspectives. And so, we do a great job of doing that because many of us on our team share that lived experience, are from these same communities, but I think I'm really focused on how can we create those spaces and environments where young people, we can bring them along to, add their own 2 cents and ensure that their voices are heard with their own voice and with their own perspective. So I think that's been key to our success to ensure that young people's voices are centered in all that we do. And also, like I said, going back to where we obviously have to go back to our roots, go back to where it starts, and it starts with young people and it's going to end with young people and ensuring that they're a part of everything that we do.
No, that's great. So I got maybe a tough question. So the Toronto Youth Cabinet gets together. You're centering all the voices of the youth. What happens when you disagree as a cabinet? Or is there, I'm sure there must be some situations. And that's a reality of, I think, the community issues that are impacting us. Because if we went into any community, particularly even Black racialized communities, not everybody would agree what is the first solution. Some people do want more policing when it comes to community safety, and some people want more programming. So how do we bridge the gap in understanding so we arrive at some sort of sustainable solution?
we focus on evidence-based solutions. I think that's the key in all that we've done, be it municipally, provincially, so on and so forth, is what does the evidence tell us is going to work to actually ensure that young people are supported. And 9 times out of 10, or I argue 10 times out of 10, but I just don't believe in perfection. But 9 times out of 10, when we stand by the evidence-based solutions, most people are going to fall in line, and even more so are going to also share our message. And even more so, once again, it's like we have our ears to the ground. And so obviously there's going to be disagreements and not a lot of alignment on some issues. However, I think for as long as we continue to agree and firmly be rooted in the vision of, hey, we want a safer, more equitable, more youth-friendly Toronto. If that's the mission, that's the vision. No matter how we get there, the goal is to get there. And I think thankfully TYC were able to come into spaces and take a lead role. And sometimes you have to like not push and shove, but you have to just kind of come into it, taking a lead role with young people, because once again we are youth as well, and coming into these conversations. And I think that's helped us navigate some of the disagreements that young people have or public have. Like you said, I want more police instead, or forget programming, let's do A, B, and C, and which are real issues. Even on the homelessness file, young people disagree with, should we have more youth shelters, or should we be doing things a different way? And so I think these are real issues and real discussions, which help to ensure that the solutions we're going to have at the end are truly informed by community. So I think disagreements are healthy and helpful.
No, that's well said. And I think, I love that you said data-driven solutions, because when we look at community safety, we know more policing or punitive measures has not worked. Yeah. And so we need more upstream, programming that addresses the root causes, like you said, employment, housing, support networks. Okay, having said that, maybe you can just ground us in the life of a youth living in Toronto. I mean, when I think of it, when I think of housing, employment, schooling, like walk me through some of the challenges that youth are facing. And there was lots of crisis happening, particularly post-COVID that came to light. Yeah. So walk me through the intersection of those. I'm reminded of a quote by Audre Lorde that says, we don't live single issue lives. Although we tend to talk about issues in themes, we know they intersect. So what is your take around all of those pieces coming together?
Listen, I mean, if you have a young person who's going to school and who might be acting out or not getting good grades, so on and so forth, you might just think, oh, that's a bad kid, or maybe that kid is a special needs. Like we'll put all these labels and whatnot on them. Meanwhile, that kid's hungry. They're facing food insecurity. Why are they facing food insecurity? Because their parents are facing poverty. Why are their parents facing poverty? Because the parents' jobs are precarious. Because that young person can't even access a good, gainful, meaningful job, so that they can not only just support themselves, but support their families. And once again, you trace that back to the precarious housing that they also face, and many of them having to work multiple jobs to be able to afford to live in the city, or even the opposite of, yeah, sure, their rent's affordable, but any extra income that they get, then housing is increasing their rent. And so they're not able to save, and they're not able to, have those aspirations to, buy and afford to live or buy a home in the city of Toronto. And so I think when we look at the issues that young people are facing, obviously they're very connected with that of their parents and families. And so when we talk about housing precarity, when we talk about rising youth unemployment, some of the challenges with inequitable education, we talk about lack of access to resources. I always say I can walk into a school in this neighborhood and across the street to another school, and the experiences of the young people are going to be so different. And I think that's the scary part, is that I'm always also saying Toronto is a tale of two cities. But you see that within neighborhoods, tale of two cities within one neighborhood, within one block, the difference and disparity in access and resources and support and in experiences. And I think that's very troublesome for me, because I'm always focused, and my main motto is to ensure that young people, irregardless of their socioeconomic status and demographic, are able to succeed, thrive, and reach their full individual potential in the city of Toronto and province of Ontario. But unfortunately, that's not been the reality for many young people due to, the disparities that exist.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, sometimes within the same postal code, you have almost two different realities of very, high socioeconomic status and low socioeconomic status. I'm reminded of my university days. There was two reports that I really loved. One was called Poverty by Postal Code by United Way, where it really was this spatial analysis of communities. And there was another report called the Halchansky report that basically said there's 3 cities within Toronto, and the communities that are closest to the subway and the downtown core are often thriving because it also increases the property values. And so it gets really interesting because we see how resourcing communities now impacts the safety and the social issues. And so
absolutely,
my next question is, given the rising youth mental health crisis, what strategies has the Toronto Youth Cabinet advocated and promoted, especially in the context of Black youth and marginalized communities?
So one of the advocacy pieces that we've pushed for were pushing for one mandatory mental health literacy in the curriculum to ensure that young people had the tools, competencies, and skills to recognize when they themselves are facing challenges and are able to have that confidence to go seek help. The second piece was pushing for mandatory mental health training for all school staff. That's something else that we were able to get done. We didn't want it just for teachers. But like anyone who is in a school who interacts with a young person needs this training so that they can be able to realize when a young person is facing challenges. And all this is gonna, help Black youth, but I think even more specifically when it comes to the millions of dollars in investments we've been able to push for more mental health supports, like mental health workers, child and youth workers, social workers, so on and so forth, making sure that they're also representative of the population of Ontario and the schools. You can't have a school with predominantly Black youth, but then have one, you're not going to have a lot of Black teachers, but also not have a lot of Black mental health workers and support service workers to support that young person and their unique experiences. I think that's a big thing. I know when I was even seeking therapy a couple of years ago, finding that therapist who looked like me, who shared my experiences were key. And that's the same thing that our young Black students need and require. And so I think those are some 3 key pieces that we've been able to push for to support young people's mental health and address this rise in youth mental health crisis. But I'm also glad about the work we've been able to do holistically, because there's many things, as you know, that affect a young person's mental health. When we talk about our push for free menstrual products across Ontario schools to deal with menstrual equity, we know those who are facing period poverty are not those living in, Rosedale. It's those living in Rexdale, Falstaff, so on and so forth. And so making sure that they have access to the right supports and resources, in this case, pads, tampons, and other menstrual products so they can menstruate with dignity. Our push for food insecurity. That's affecting young person's mental health as well too. And so I'm glad about the other pieces we've been able to do. Yes, focus on mental health, but also on the other socioeconomic conditions that young people face, which will help improve their overall well-being.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the quote, like, look good, feel good, right? Because when you are confident and you're in a better mood, then when you show up to school, you're going to be more focused and engaged, and vice versa.
Which is why I'm glad also mentioning that our back to school give backs. When I became ED, I started a annual summer back to school give back. And so for the last 3 years, we've been able to give backpacks filled with school supplies and sometimes non-perishable food items to over 7,000 young people in about 15 to 18 different neighborhood improvement areas across the city. Because you said, look good, feel good. We want them to look fresh, have a fresh backpack, new school supplies, get a fresh cut, and go to school feeling confident. And that cannot be understated, because so oftentimes young people are going to school with they're young people, so sometimes jealousy, envy. But hey, I think the message is, despite what community you live in, you deserve good things. And I'm glad we've been able to do that as well and provide that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm reminded of the point you started out with when we label students or youth at bad kid or at risk. We historically have done that with communities. I know you've used a new term, which is more of a strength-based neighborhood improvement areas, but for a long time, when the initiative came out, it was called Toronto's at-risk neighborhoods, starting out with 13 of them, and Jane and Finch being one of them. But now we've realized that label actually blames the community. And from a stereotypical lens, and rather we now call it neighborhood improvement areas, because we know it's the institutional neglect and the oppression that is breeding that type of unsafeness or poverty. And so we need to look at the root causes, which takes me to the next question of, sometimes I do this with the guests, because, we're called Safer Communities Canada, and we're trying to understand community safety means different things to different people. And I think you bring the youth lens and the youth advocacy piece. So when you think of a safe community or community safety, and in terms of the needs of the youth, what words come to your mind? Give me 3 words or phrases that come to your mind that in your vision embodies community safety.
3 words: bounty of opportunity. A safe community has a bounty of opportunity, a bounty of resources, support. A safe community is going to have access to a youth space. It's going to have a park. It's going to have good schools. It's going to have not have a food desert, because we know many of our vulnerable communities have food desert. So it's going to have a good food store that's affordable, not your Loblaws, but something that people can actually afford to buy. A safe community is going to have a host of resources and a bounty of these resources and opportunities for young people to be able to thrive and succeed, and really tap into. Because I think the biggest issue, and what's something that we found, especially in our schools, is when we talk about I think for French immersion and all these other programs, they were not accessible to many young people in our equity deserving communities. Thankfully now, slowly we're breaking down those barriers and making sure that young people, no matter where your postal code is, you're able to access. But a safe community is going to have all those opportunities for young people to thrive and to choose from too. Because I think that's the thing. Fill them up with a bounty of opportunities, so to the point where they get overwhelmed and they themselves can choose what they want to tap into. Let's not have this scarcity mindset and scarcity attitude of, we're just going to give them something small and let them deal with it and make use with it. That's really not going to promote and ensure a safe community at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've often said, it's not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity gap. You've articulated so well around create opportunities and resource those opportunities, and you will create maybe thriving communities, and that automatically creates safer communities, because a lot of people, to your point, the kid who's disengaged but is hungry, it's the same thing. If you can't pay your bills, then you gravitate towards riskier behavior.
Absolutely.
I mean, nobody can do this work alone. So how does the Toronto Youth Cabinet look to collaborate with different social groups? Obviously, there's a core centering of youth, but you work with many other stakeholders, whether those are organizations, they're politicians, the private sector. How do you bring these entities together with a aligned vision to address those root causes impacting youth?
I'm big on collaboration. Like, you cannot get things done without working with other people, but even more so, especially when we talk about policy change, I strongly believe that long-term sustainable policy is only going to be the case when you are able to seek somewhat of a consensus with other people. Like in all the joint statements and all the work I still see of myself in the Toronto Youth Cabinet, we're putting it out with multiple stakeholders, because at the end of the day, when government does buy into it, we don't want the next government to come in and change it up, because they look back like, when this was pushed, they had a host of these same organizations who co-signed it. And so this is clearly a policy that needs to stay. And so collaboration is key. Obviously focusing on young people too. They are our main collaborators. They have to be our main collaborators throughout this whole process. And I think the way we've been able to approach it is coming from a point of view of, hey, this is what young people need. This is where you can play a role to support and to address that gap. And if you truly do have that commitment to, yes, empower young people and support young people, you're gonna let us lead, and you're gonna follow young people. I think that's the reality. Is when TYC comes into these conversations or begins these conversations, we're leading it, and it takes these adult organizations to say to themselves, we're gonna step back and let these young people lead, and we're gonna give them all the support that they need. I'm really grateful for our union partners and private sector partners and just all the institutions and organizations we've been able to work with, who've allowed myself and the team to lead what we've pushed for, and they've given us a tremendous amount of support to that end goal. But collaboration is key to ensure success in all the things that we're doing.
Well, great. Thank you for that. And I mean, I think what I love about the conversation is you embody what it means. I think it's easy to complain or just say, hey, I'm impacted by this issue, but really pushing the needle to say, how can we create spaces and avenues for youth to take that passion, and sometimes it's the anger, It's the frustration. It's not always lovey-dovey.
Yeah.
How do you take that and harness that for motivation and action to create change?
And I look at why I even joined the Toronto UK, because I explained how and who and whatnot, but why I joined the Toronto cabinet was due to my own experiences of systemic racism. Like I said, when I came back to Ghana, I thought it was going to be a homecoming, but instead I almost faced streaming. They almost put my brother and I, for those who don't know, into lower level academic courses. And so we wanted to take university, but they were like, oh no, take locally developed or college classes. And thankfully, due to the advocacy of myself and my sister and mom and dad and parents, whatnot, that withstood the institution's attempts to stream us. And I remember that experience, it stuck with me, because it wasn't just that experience. It began with attempts to stream us, and then began to with teachers who had low aspirations and who belittled us and our prospects. And then it began to, once again, the lack of access to resources and support in my school. Thankfully, it was present in my community, but it wasn't in my school. And so that really, I had a lot of anger. Yeah. And so when I joined the Toronto U cabinet, I used that anger, and my first initiative was to address systemic racism in our education system. First recommendation was, de-streaming in grades 9 and 10. And thankfully, we were able to get that done in grade 9. Yeah. We're going to keep pushing for grade 10. But really, like you said, using that, our experiences, although it might be negative, but using that as fuel to push for positive change, and not in our own, only in our lives, but I know for me, it's the lives of my nieces and nephews as well.
Yeah, and I think that, if you don't create those opportunities, then that frustration and anger might get towards a negative coping mechanism. Yeah. And sometimes that is in the form of revenge or violence, which we see impacting our communities.
Absolutely.
So I think, even at YAAACE, with our Towards Peace and New Narrative Violence Prevention and Intervention programs, we really try to center youth and people with lived experiences, because it's hard to talk to someone about these issues if they don't respect you, or they don't think you have some sort of, currency in understanding the intricacies of the issue.
Absolutely.
And I think becoming involved and engaged opens up so many doors. I know before we started the show, you were telling me you just got back from Germany, where they were trying to learn the lessons and how to replicate a similar model like the Toronto Youth Cabinet. How was that experience?
Germany was great. Things are cheap over there, so we got to take those lessons from the Europe. But it was a great experience, really being able to have that cultural exchange and deepen some of the best practices that we're doing here in Canada, but also engaging with our counterparts, in Frankfurt, but also, like I said, folks from Guangzhou, China, Yokohama, Japan, Philadelphia, and other cities came together as well to learn from each other, and we were able to share best practices. I think the message that we heard was folks are craving an opportunity for young people to be a part of decision making. And I know right now the UN has a campaign which is the Let Youth Lead, and that's to ensure young people are more institutionalized and a part of decision making. And thankfully, the TYC has been a perfect model of that, because we are one of the rarest entities across. I thought it was only North America, but when I went to Europe, I was like, okay, damn, this is something that even Europe, they don't really have. Not all these cities and countries have those mechanisms. So a great opportunity to share best practices and learn from one another across the world.
No, that's awesome. We're gonna try to wrap it up with about 2 questions. This one, being Toronto Life Magazine's rising star and thinking about your journey and what you're continuing to do, what advice would you give to young advocates who aspire to create positive change in their community, but every day they're feeling more hopeless because they feel like folks are not listening to them and instead judging them as incompetent?
I'll answer that in multiple parts, but I think the first part is start where you lead and start where you are, or I should say lead where you are and lead where where you find yourself. I think that's very important, because so oftentimes we want to do something big and grandiose, and sure, it's going to get to that point probably eventually, but we can't come into it with the hopes of just wanting to change the world, so to speak. Even if you are able to just change your youth space, change your family, change your local community, like if you're able to just change where you find yourself, that holds a lot of power. And I know when I came into the Toronto Youth Cabinet, I was doing some of those changing work locally, very small, in my community, in my local youth space. And obviously being able to do it across the city, but never would I have guessed I would have been able to do it across the province due to some of those barriers and obstacles that I have faced. And so to the young people who might face those obstacles and barriers and challenges, I think stay focused on your why. And my why is my niece and nephew and the young people coming up, to ensure that they have better opportunities and access to opportunities and a bounty of opportunity, like I said. And so stay focused and hone in on your why, and just really, really surround yourself with the right mentors and individuals who are going to support you. A lot of people belittled me in respects to my advocacy. Someone like Stephen, oh, you're not going to get Black history in the curriculum, or you're not going to get the menstrual equity, like you're not going to A, B, and C. Like a lot of people who I was pretty close with was like, this is not going to happen, because one, people have been pushing for it, and two, they did not have that confidence in a young Black youth from the west side of Toronto would be able to achieve and push for some of these successful projects. So I think my message would be, stay rooted in your community, with know your why. Ensure that your right mentors, individual support system is around you, and ultimately too, like, don't care about, like, just don't care. Like, don't care about the institution and all those other barriers and obstacles. Like, don't let that stop you. And yeah, it's easy to say don't care, and sometimes it's challenging for me not to care. But I think when you have that realization that, hey, I'm meant to be here, this is my rightful place and rightful spot, and I am competent, I'm able, I have the ability. I think that's gonna help you and help all the young people achieve whatever they want to achieve in their community and across this world, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, those are really great advice. I mean, I love the fact that you said focus on your why. I mean, I listen to a lot of motivational speaking, especially when I work out. And one of the things is always your why has to be greater than the challenge. And when you know your why, then you're able to push through it. And I think, as you said beautifully, advocacy and activism work, it's complex. Yeah. And it's not always lovey-dovey and everybody saying, great idea. So you have to be willing to push and get them to understand the vision and the idea when you're the only one who sees it. And that is leadership. Yeah. That is kind of seeing what others can't see and being able to bring people together. And I think you've done it so well and so graciously. So the last question is really, any advice you got for the people out there? And importantly, how can people get involved and connect with the Toronto Youth Cabinet?
I think another advice I'd say is the empathy. I think empathy is key. In doing this work, is if you're unable to look beyond yourself and put yourself in another person's shoes, you're not going to be able to do this work effectively for the people who are relying on you to do this work effectively. I look at many of the initiatives I've taken on. I'll use the one that's most notable, like my menstrual equity. I don't identify as a menstruator. However, that did not stop me from, pushing for free menstrual products because, I don't need it, I don't menstruate, I'm not a woman, so on and so forth, menstruated.
Allyship.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's putting yourself in other people's shoes, and also recognizing one's positionality. Because even right now, I have that upbringing similar to many young people I encounter, but I still have a certain level of privilege right now. And so really recognizing where I'm at, who I am, and let it help, and using that and helping me to navigate in this institutions and spaces I find myself in. So I think empathy and understanding your positionality is key. And so how can people get involved? Though the second half of the question, hey, check out the TYC on our Instagram at TO Youth Cabinets, Instagram, Twitter, and our website, thetyc.ca. We're really looking for more young people to be involved and be engaged, because truthfully, you yourself are able to achieve whatever you want to achieve. I think that's the message I really want to put out there, is don't think any issue is too grandiose to be able to accomplish. We've shown that, and I want to remind folks, we are young people. I'm only 23 years old, and so we are young people who are doing the damn thing. And so if you're a young person who's facing those same challenges and you want to really do something about it, you don't want to just complain and pout, but you actually want to say, hey, how can I make a difference in the lives of my peers and myself? Then please join the Toronto Youth Cabinet. There's always a space for you.
Well, it's been rich, Mr. Stephen Mensah. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming to the studio and being on another episode of Safer Communities Canada.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Cut.